a family picture collage. Here's great-grandfather William Bradley and great-grandmother Mary Jane Bradley, formerly Johnson. This is grandfather William J. Bradley and grandmother Sarah Matilda Long. Here's grandfather again around 1910 in Hoboken when he worked as a carriage maker. In the 1940s, he worked as a bricklayer on the New York City subway system, and also in Virginia during the construction of the Pentagon. This is Frank Chiche Bradley. How about Sarah Matilda Bradley and Neil E. Morris Sr., seen here on their wedding day, September 9, 1938. He served in the Pacific during World War II. And this is the couple later in life. Where are they all now? Well, here's Sarah M. Bradley visiting the family plot in the 1960s. See the trees in the background? Here's another look, circa 1950s, 1960s. The entire family now rests here at the Weehawken Cemetery in North Bergen, New Jersey. At this spot, to be exact. Something is missing, however. This image from Google Earth shows what it looked like before trees were felled this month. As first reported by WCBS-TV, a renovation was the reason cited. For 72-year-old Neil E. Morris and his wife Ellen, the news prompted a 90-minute trip from LaGrange in Dutchess County, New York State. It's near Poughkeepsie. He was afraid the, quote, irreplaceable gravestone was affected. He was relieved to find it undamaged.
Morning, it's just there's no respect in anything anymore. And there's obviously there was no respect paid here. I don't know what their reason was to take down the trees. That's not a concern. The way they took down the trees is the concern. And to see the damage that they've caused.
According to New Jersey Cemetery Board law posted on the New Jersey Consumer Affairs website, quote, a cemetery company may not renovate a section or area of the cemetery necessitating the removal of memorials from an interment space without board approval. The cemetery company shall notify the interment space owner of the proposed renovations 30 days before the action. Publication in a local paper circulating in the county in which the interment space is located and posting on the grounds shall be considered sufficient notice. For Mr. Morris, however, his thoughts are with his loved ones. It's not just a grave, it's family, he said.
My grandmother came over from Ireland in 1899, and she settled in Queens when she married my grandfather. So the rest of us, we've been all over. We lived on Long Island many years. We were living upstate many years. My mother and father had moved over to Pennsylvania for many years and then moved down to Florida for the remainder of the years.
Morris's family goes back 12 generations to Peter Clausen van Noorden, who left Holland, arrived in 1637 at the age of 10, worked as an indentured servant for 8 years on a farm on the Rensselaer estate near Albany. He was asked to change his name to reflect his profession, so he chose Wyckoff, a Dutch word meaning a judge or public servant. Wyckoff settled in Flatlands, which became part of Brooklyn.
Well, over here is my father and my mother. Their ashes are buried there. On this Bradley headstone under there is my great-grandfather, great-grandmother, grandfather, grandmother, and their son, Chichi, which was my mother's brother.
Frank died around 1937 at the age of 14. He suffered from Down syndrome. People come here and they just see that name, and it's sometimes hard to remember all the people who are behind that name and their history and their life.
Well, my mother just passed away in 2010, and before I had buried her and my father, I buried them in a common mixed urn, if you would. Right now I'm 72 years old, but I won't be here. No more room at the inn, as they say.
And I see that Mr. Morris Sr. is a World War II Navy vet.
Yes, he was.
Is there anything you could tell me about that?
He served in the Pacific. He was always embarrassed about his naval time because he didn't see action. I was never embarrassed about it. I thought he was just one of the fortunate ones that didn't see action. There were so many boys and ladies at the time that did see action, didn't come home. So, I'm very proud of the service that he gave this country.
Where in the Pacific?
He was out on the USS Hainesworth, hull number 700, and he was out around the Hawaii area. Served some time in Hawaii after Pearl Harbor, obviously. I think he went in 1944 and came home in 1946. And I was born in 1947. Go figure. Well, it's always been a concern that, what happens to the remains after, they're here 100 years, or is there any kind of a 100-year limitation? There used to be things, well, they can't upset a cemetery, at least this is what I heard as a kid, they can't upset a cemetery for 100 years after the last person has been interred. Being 72 years old, I realized that 100 years can go by pretty quick. And, my mother was buried here in 2010. So that means that 2110, she's been here 100 years. Now, will the cemetery be here after that? I don't know.
And just finally, what would be your message for elected officials and cemetery administrators about what your expectations are?
Well, as my wife mentioned earlier today, show respect. Okay, there doesn't seem to be a lot of respect in this world anymore, and I'd like to see respect brought back. And how do you do that? One person at a time, one good thought at a time. I would wish that the cemetery people and the town officials would think about people, think about how they are going to impact people with the decisions that they make. When I was working years ago, before I was able to make any decisions towards rules or regulations or whatever, I had to do an impact statement and sit down and figure out, well, how is this going to affect the overall outcome? And I think that's something that should be done on almost all these projects. And this one doesn't appear to have had that. At least they didn't take into consideration the impact on the family that's left behind. That's all.
So these are some of the people who lived and died and were buried in this cemetery. Every grave and family plot has a story. And families say they want answers. For now, Darias News has confirmed that, quote, the total soil disturbance exceeded 5,000 square feet without a valid soil erosion and sediment control certification necessary. What will happen next? Was proper notice given? Is consumer affairs part of this story? Exactly how long does a cemetery have to stay a cemetery? Perhaps we won't get all the answers until 2019. Reporting in North Bergen, Cesar Darias.